Good evening. Happy July 8th. My name is David Kafka. I'm your host this evening for All Access Belize. And I am here to give you your education on all things Belize. We talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Anything you want to know, we'll discuss it. And we appreciate all you who are attending. And our guest is here. And let me promote him. Sorry, everyone. So thank you so much for attending. Again, I'm coming to you from San Pedro at Mahogany Bay Village, and here in beautiful San Pedro in the Belize district. And next week I'll be in my house in Placencia, so I'm anxious to go there and check on everything and see how everybody's going and how everybody's doing. So we have some wonderful content this evening. We have our guest, Diamon Lupo, and while he gets set up, we will just kind of, last month, somebody stumped me on a question on the QRP, and they were asking if one or both parties have to be in for the 30 consecutive days. And it's each person that is qualified on the qualified retirement program they have to be in Belize for 30 days. So tonight we're going to kind of talk about another QRP, and that's the eQRP. And my friend Diamon Lupo is going to be, we'll introduce him right now. And we also have Yolanda in the background. She's going to be taking your questions. And if you would, put all your questions in the question and answer box. Not in the chat box. She'll use the chat box to put in links and things like that. And we've had some pre-submitted questions, but we'll ask you to kind of put them in the question and answer box, and we'll turn it over to Damion. And Damion, thanks for joining us, buddy. And tell us a little bit about yourself. And if you have some slides you want to prepare, or just what do you want to talk about?
No, thanks for having me. I'm happy to. Hold on. All right. Sorry about that. So I thought we could talk about the eQRP, like you mentioned, and really give people some insights into the retirement space and options and things like that. I've been a real estate investor for 20 years and have started 50 plus companies. So I've got a lot of practical experience being in the trenches with everything from venture capital to insurance and retirement, precious metals, and a lot of international investing because of all of our clients that are doing a lot of eQRP investing in Belize, Panama. So really familiar with what you, David, and your clients are doing. And I just thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to answer questions and really talk about options for specifically the U.S. Individual citizen that has retirement accounts and they're wanting to do something other than invest in mutual funds, and provide those options, because most people don't realize that they can do something other than Wall Street stuff. And really it's unlimited real estate and crypto and gold and silver and all sorts of really cool stuff. So I thought that'd be a great place for us to focus tonight and give people a lot of new ideas.
Yep, exactly. Good, very good. As Robert Helms and Russell Gray talk about, no investor left behind. We know in Belize, the QRP is the Qualified Retirement Program. And if you're 45 years old and over, and you make an income of at least $2,000 a month, you can bring your stuff over duty-free and you get kind of a residency, if you will. You can bring in a car, a plane, a boat, and all your toys and all your personal belongings. But the eQRP is something totally different. It is a self-directed IRA, and as Damion calls it, it's the Ferrari of self-directed IRAs. So can you kind of just go into that a little bit, Damion, about what a QRP or a eQRP is?
Yeah, I'm going to get a little bit granular with you guys and give you some idea, some differences. There's most people, when you think about retirement accounts, you think of IRAs or 401ks. And what the eQRP is, it's actually something under the 401 section. So it's a little bit different. We call it the Ferrari of 401ks, because most people mix everything together. and this is a very unique product and part of the tax code. And really what it is, it's a type of tax shelter that allows you to have all your retirement money inside of in this vehicle, and you're able to have checkbook control. So you can invest, do what you'd like to do with it, invest directly in real estate. You can put all your IRAs and 401ks, 403bs, all those things. If you work for the government, a thrift savings plan, you can move it all over into an eQRP. And the E is an enhanced qualified retirement plan. So it's a unique type of thing that it gives you control and really access with, because normally, like with an IRA, there's a custodian, and that's very frustrating because you want to try to do something and it takes you 4 or 6 weeks to get them to sign papers. With an eQRP, you're the trustee, which is the same thing. That means you sign the check, you sign the papers, and you can invest within minutes, not months. So minutes versus months makes a difference, especially when things are happening quickly. Today, you can't afford to have months go by. And quite frankly, it's expensive to have to wait that much. So the eQRP allows you to not only put all your old retirement accounts into it, but it allows you to put additional money. So if you're self-employed, you can put 58,000 per person, could be a family, a couple with kids, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars per year into a plan. And what does that mean? It means you have tax deductions. It means you can invest tax deferred, maybe even tax free. So it gives you a lot of tools and options to really go to a place where your taxes go to zero. And that's the goal, getting our taxes down to zero and having control so you're not stuck in the Wall Street casino.
Yeah. So just if you have a 401k or a self-directed IRA, how much can you put in a year?
So the typical 401k, you're allowed to put about $19,000. This year it's $19,500, and maybe you have some matching from a company, so it might be a little bit more. But typically, people are putting about $20,000 approximately. With an IRA, it's kind of a joke. $6,000 a year doesn't really do much. With an eQRP, it's $58,000 if you're under 50. If you're over 50, it's $64,500, and that's per person. So it could be, if you have a couple, you could be at $130,000 pretty easy. And so it's a massive difference. It could literally be 10, 20 times more than what you're currently doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. I mean, I have a client here now that bought some property with their self-directed IRA, and they've already maxed out their deductions. So they can't make the payments on the property anymore. And so I've told them to get in touch with you, but they're so unfamiliar with the eQRP, and they're just going to lose it instead of being able to put over $50,000 a year in. That would solve their problems, right from the get-go. So can anybody have a eQRP?
Pretty much anybody that's an American citizen or has an American business, a business based in the US. So if you're an individual, whether you're retired, whether you have a W-2 job, whether you have your own, whether you're a real estate agent like you, David, really it's anybody that has any type of self-employment income or any type of business would be qualified. And that's really pretty straightforward, because if you think about it today with the internet, it's not hard. You can start a business in 5 minutes. So anybody that wants to do this would be eligible, because we live in the age of the internet and businesses pop up at the speed of light.
Yeah, so I want everybody to kind of understand how easy it is. So once you get in touch with Damion and his people, he does all the paperwork, correct?
Yeah, we do all the paperwork. We set everything up. It's kind of funny, and I say this tongue in cheek, but most people, if there's a complaint about anything, they say it seems too easy, because we do all the heavy lifting behind the scenes. And so somebody that becomes a client is going to have a really simple, straightforward experience of us doing the work and them having a checkbook at the end after a week or so. We spend hours on the phone getting money transferred. If you've got an IRA and it's already invested, we can move the assets over into an eQRP. And that way, like in the case of your clients that ran out of their ability to put money in, we could move that money and that investment over. It's called an in-kind rollover. We move it over, no tax, no penalty, and no cost. And they move it over. And once they have it there, they could contribute all the money they needed up to that $58,000 per year. And so that does solve the problem, even if you think you're stuck.
Right, exactly. And what about, I had a question and I can't remember. So what about, well, we have a question here. So is there an equivalent of an eQRP and a Roth IRA?
So the eQRP has a Roth component. And so the Roth is basically after tax. It means once the money is Roth, it means it's never taxed again. that's why people really like the Roth IRA, because they got the money to Roth IRA and they thought, this is amazing, I'm never taxed. The problem is, if you ever invest in real estate with a Roth IRA and it has any type of debt, mortgage or anything, or you invest in a syndication with other people and there's debt, you pay UBIT tax, which is 37% on most of that profit. So you invest 100,000 and that 100 turns into 200. You could easily spend $20,000 or $25,000 in taxes, even though you have a tax-free account. It's a crazy thing, but it's only applied to IRAs and Roth IRAs. The eQRP has the Roth component, which means you can have no tax, no UBIT tax, and have your money tax-free forever plus 10. So it's forever plus 10, meaning your entire lifetime it's tax-free. And then when you die, it's tax-free from the grave for another decade.
Man, so that's huge. So again, if you understand what he just said, no UBIT tax, if you are investing in something that is financed. So if you are, he can save you over 30% right off the bat by switching from a traditional self-directed IRA to the eQRP. So go ahead, Damion.
I mean, it's really interesting that most people don't know this, and they say, well, why hasn't anybody told me? And then the answer is that they don't have any interest in telling you how to leave them, because the fees that are involved, and everybody charges fees. We charge a setup fee and we charge an annual fee, and we charge an appropriate number. We don't charge you because we exist. We charge you because we're doing a service that's valuable to you. And somebody that's going to lose that fee, unfortunately, doesn't often do the right thing. They don't tell you that you have this tax coming. They just say, well, it's up to you. You're supposed to know. And that's how the industry works. So our job is to make sure you have all the information. And even if we don't do business with somebody, we're going to make sure they have the right information to make an intelligent decision. Otherwise, we're not really doing our service as a financial firm, as an educational firm. We're more of an education company than anything. We educate people and then help guide them towards the most appropriate thing. And sometimes that's something else that has nothing to do with what we offer in terms of our products and services.
Right, very good. And is there some things you can't buy with the eQRP?
Ironically, the IRS doesn't tell you necessarily what you can do. They tell you what you can't do, which means you can do anything else. So they say you can't do collectibles and you can't invest with certain people. So you can't invest in collectible cars or wine or collectible coins like 1920 doubloons, Spanish doubloons or something. If there were doubloons in 1920, probably 1620. So you can't do those type of things. And then you can't invest with certain people. Like you can't invest directly with your kids or your parents with your retirement account. You can invest with your brothers or sisters, and there's ways to do it where you can structure it with disqualified parties. You just have to make sure that nobody's in control of the deal of these parties. But it's pretty wide open. So pretty much any real estate other than what you live in, you can't benefit from the real estate. So like David, you take your eQRP, you can't go and invest in a property that you're the agent on where you make a commission, because that's a current benefit. So there are a few rules like that, and we help provide the navigation so that people stay in compliance. And it's not overly complicated from our perspective, because we do it every day, and it's easy for a client because the client comes to us and says, here's the deal, am I good? And we say yes, or we say no, here's how you do it. So you talk to a lot of attorneys and their answer is no. You start to think that your name is no because all they say to you is no, no, no. And you're like, well, are you saying no, or are you calling me no? And we look at it differently. We try to figure out how to make it work and give them options, give them a way to do it.
Right, very good. Now, people are always asking me, okay, I have a 401k. I want to move it into a self-directed IRA or an eQRP. And they kind of are baffled that there's no fees. So can you explain why they can roll it over like a regular 401k into an eQRP and there's no fees involved in that?
Yeah, so transferring directly is not a taxable event, and typically there's no fees for the transfer. Once you have an account, we charge to set up an account, and we charge an annual fee. The annual fee is $500, and setup varies from $3,500 depending on whether you have any employees or anything. It can be a few $1,000s more than that. But for an individual, it's going to be $3,000-$4,000, and then all the transfers, all the rollovers, unlimited amounts, no fees. So there's no additional fees for filings, for rollovers, for anything. And that's just part of the value that we provide. We don't nickel and dime people for things. There are, I would say most firms, in fact, I don't know of any firms that don't do it. There may be, but most firms charge for every little thing. You want something faxed, you want some research. It's $25 a document. It's $50 per transfer. It's like, to me, it's annoying. And so we built the company around being very transparent and charging appropriately, flatly, and making sure it was clean.
Very good. Okay. Let's go to another question. So tonight's topic, is it relevant to Canadians? Our tax accounts are set up differently than in the US. Is there a tax equivalent or a eQRP equivalent for the Canadians?
They have their own type of retirement accounts. In Australia, they have superannuizations. It depends on a different place. I mean, you really need a localized tax advisor to give you those options. One thing that people will do is they'll set up retirement accounts in the US for a US based company. And so as long as you have a US company that's the sponsor of a plan, people from all over the world have retirement accounts in the US. So it's actually something that you may be able to do being a Canadian resident. So this may apply. The other way it applies is that most Canadians know Americans that have retirement accounts. And so you can be the superhero that helps them unleash those funds. And sometimes those people end up doing deals together. I mean, Canadians and Americans typically are pretty good friends. So, I mean, we do deals together all the time. So it might be something you can help somebody else with, even if you're not using it yourself.
Right. And Damion, tell us how much money is locked up in retirement accounts.
Right now, it's somewhere between 35 and $40 trillion. And so you've got most of the liquidity in the United States is in retirement accounts. Most of the investable assets are in retirement accounts that are able to be invested in things. And I always get excited about talking about how much there's almost $1 billion in the eQRP accounts. And then I go, so we're like 1/10,000th of the way there, or 1/30,000th of the way there to taking on Wall Street. So we got a long ways to go. But I'll tell you what, the people that have control of their money with their eQRPs, they're like the starfish on the beach that's cooking. And when they get thrown back in the water with control of their money, they feel pretty good and they feel pretty valuable. And I mean, for us, it's worth it every starfish one at a time.
For sure. And we both have met, Robert Kiyosaki. We both have, talked with him, had dinner with him, things like that. And he wrote that book called Fake, talking about fake teachers, fake assets, things like that. And he wrote that book with Slidell, right? Or no, Who Stole My Pension was with Slidell. I'm sorry. Tell us about that a little bit and why, if you have a retirement plan, you should switch to a eQRP. And also, if you could answer, can you switch it while you're still working?
Yeah, so what Ted Siddell and Kiyosaki talked about in Who Stole My Pension was the underfunded nature of the pension plans in America. Most pension plans are vastly underfunded, and really there's a lot of fraud going on where you have plan administrators that are trying desperately to keep up with the plan protocol or their requirements that they grow. Most pensions have to grow at about 7 to 8% per year to stay liquid. And if you look at what they're able to invest in, most of them are investing in bonds, they're investing in real estate, debt, and this stuff is paying 3 and 4% maybe. So they're not making it up. So what they're doing is they're investing a lot of the money with hedge funds, and they're paying, these hedge fund people are coming to the pension managers and saying, hey, we would love to help you make 10 or 12 or 15%. All we charge is 8% or 5% or whatever. And so they're charging these massive amounts of fees, and they're loading these pensions up with really toxic assets, really high risk assets. And it's becoming a ticking time bomb. And there's a lot of them, like in Kentucky, they're super underfunded. So we've had all sorts of people that have come in from places like UPS that expected a $5,000 a month pension. And they talk about this. I think Kiyosaki had one of the guys on his show, and he talked about the guy that was expecting $5,000 a month, and he got $1,000 a month. And after working 25, 30 years at UPS. So what the point of all that is that what you expect because you think, oh, I'm with a union or this thing is guaranteed. The PBHC, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, is supposed to be backstopping pensions, but it can't backstop the amount that are underfunded. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars. So whatever you think you have in the future, if you're not controlling it, you probably aren't going to end up with what you think. So the question is, what can you do to fix that? And one of the big things you can do is get the money out of that system and put it into your hands and become financially literate. While you're working, you're able to sometimes move your assets in 401ks and pensions out of those plans into an eQRP. Most of the time you can't. Most of the time you have to leave the job. but it's always a good idea to figure out what your options are and then do the best you can. I don't think it's inappropriate to find out what your options are. Unfortunately, most people put their head in the sand and then they get irritated and then they start yelling about, we should have the politicians fix my life. And I don't believe that. I think that it's your job to fix your life, and there may be some options that you're sitting on, but you don't even realize you have.
Correct. And it's surrounding yourself with people like Damion and smarter people than myself, that we can, surround ourselves with them people to get this education. So Thomas is asking, is there any way to move a 401k that you currently enroll in an eQRP account without quitting your job? So we kind of talked about that. So I guess you would talk to your HR person.
Yeah, typically you want to, so two people to talk to. Talk to HR and also talk to the administrator. So sometimes HR is not necessarily in the know because most people don't even ask that question. So they may not know. Talking to the administrator of the plan, and you're going to ask if they have an in-service rollover option. And that may or may not be the option. Most of the time it's not, because the companies they actually end up making a lot of money with kickbacks and things from 401k companies that are managing mutual funds. There's a lot of unscrupulous type of activity that happens. So they generally don't want you to pull your money out because the fees stop. So it's worth checking. About 1 in 50 people are able to do it while they're still working. And then of course, when you leave, you have all the options to take all the money and roll it over.
Okay, very good. Do you have a book or something that they could order if they text you or something, where they can learn more information about the eQRP?
Yeah, if we can put that in the chat, and basically what you do is you take your phone and text the word eQRP to the number 72,000, and that will give you a copy of the Cliff Notes. It's a 15-page special report on the eQRP. It goes over some of the stuff we've talked about as well as additional information, and it really sums it up. And I would recommend everybody get this. Text eQRP to 72,000. Whether it's for you or other people, I guarantee you know somebody that's retiring or has retired, feels stuck, doesn't like the stock market because it's bubbled up, and maybe just wants to have other options. You may be the one person that saves them from the markets. And all it takes is really just sharing some information. So real simple, just text the word eQRP to 72,000. And if you have any questions, you can ask the questions there. That text, once you do it, you get the report, you can text that number and it goes to my whole team, including me. So we'll all see it, and I'm happy to get on a phone call and chat with you or email, whatever you like.
Very good. Very good. I see all the questions coming in, so I appreciate that. I'm kind of going through them and just answering the ones on the eQRP while we have Damion on. So Damion, if a person has a property with the eQRP, what happens at the age of 77 when you're required, or 77 and a half when you're required to withdraw, kicks in?
So the rules changed recently. It used to be 70 and a half, now it's 72. And I don't know if that was meant to be 70 and a half, but Congress is always changing these things. So right now at 72, you're required to take out what's called an RMD, required minimum distribution. And so it's like at 72 right now, if you were 72, you'd have to pull out about 4.5% of your account. And so all that you have to do is plan and make sure you have some liquidity to be able to pull that type of money out. And that's the only thing that really has to happen. There are some maneuvers where you can roll it over from your account, and you can get rid of the RMD, and we can do that with you if that's really important. Otherwise, we just help you make sure you have liquidity. But it's typically in almost all retirement accounts that there is the RMD. There's just one exception, and if need be, we can move your stuff into that.
Okay, very good. Can you invest in an eQRP through a 1031 exchange?
I'm not really sure what that would mean. The 1031s are really just taking real estate into another and moving it into another piece of real estate, so you can avoid capital gains and really avoid paying taxes. With an eQRP, you're investing and you're keeping all of your investments inside of a silo. So meaning if you buy something, you sell it, you don't need to do anything. You can buy something else. It could be another piece of real estate. It could be gold, silver, Bitcoin, whatever you wanted, and it stays in there. There's not a taxable event. So the 1031 really just goes out the window. It doesn't really matter at that point if it's inside an eQRP. If you've already got a 1031, really it's just taking your real estate, moving it into another, it's a like exchange. So they're really very separate things. They're not going to ever cross-pollinate.
Right. And I wonder if, Steve, if you're asking about if you're investing in a group investment, such as a syndication, through your eQRP, can you do a 1031? And I don't know that answer.
Yeah, if there's a syndication that's going on, however you've invested, almost always you're going to end up getting that money back into whatever entity, or if it was you individually, it's going to come back. Very rarely do syndications ever do 1031s because you've got to 1031 the entire group, and that pretty rare that a syndication is set up so that people are all going to be on into the next deal. And so basically the money comes back. So once it comes back, it's going back to the same entity if it's your eQRP or it's you personally. So it's, like I said, they're pretty different, and they're not going to cross. One's not going to cross into the other. It just wouldn't happen.
Sounds good. Okay, so in the chat box, she did put the eQRP to 7,200.
72,000?
Or 72,000, sorry, 72,000. And also put in your website so they can get in touch with you that way. So we had a couple other questions come in. They're more real estate wise. As a first-time property investor and one who hasn't been to Belize yet, where would you recommend for a place to call home on the low end prices? Daryl, I guess it depends on budget. I mean, we do have things for pretty much any budget wise. I mean, you can get something here as low as 100,000. Probably won't be super nice, but you can call it home. The Cayo district, outside of the tourist destinations, if you will, you know, where the water is, the ocean is, those tend to be pretty good. Again, if you want to send me an email, Yolanda will throw it in my chat, and then we can kind of talk a little bit offline about it. And then I can get some more information from you. Thomas is asking again, I was told if you're QRP and you bring in a car, boat, tax-free, duty-free, when you sell it later, those taxes are due upon the sale. Yes, it is. It's based on the time you sell it, so not when you bring it in. So if it's like 10, 15 years old, and technically you really don't have to pay it, you just make the person buying it pay it. So that would probably be, you know, the best way, what I would do. And there's a valuation done at that time, and then you just pay that. So keep the questions coming. It's 6:30. We got about another 30 minutes. Also, we have a couple polls that will come up. Yolanda will throw them up. And basically, I just want to know what's good for you as far as time-wise. If y'all want to change up the time a little bit on some of these webinars, then, you know, we can do that. So she'll throw that up. And tonight, we're going to give away a free book on Kyle Wilson's, one of Kyle Wilson's books on success habits of superachievers. And we will give that away to one of the winners that answer this, one of these polls. So one question, Damion, you know, since we're kind of covered. So a eQRP is a type of self-directed IRA where you're the custodian.
It's a type of 401k. So the IRAs and the 401ks are very different, just so everybody's really clear. It's a self-directed 401k that works for individuals, for companies up to 50 people. So it's definitely in the 401 section of the tax code, just so people don't go away and think that this is an IRA. It's definitely not. And very common source of misunderstanding.
I didn't mean to say IRA. Sorry, I meant 401k.
The industry has everybody brainwashed, and we all think it IRAs.
Right. So why would anybody invest in a self-directed IRA if they knew about the eQRP? Because it seems like 1,000% better with the amount of money you can put in it. Checkbook control. I mean, I have a client that just bought a property. I tried to get them to, you know, do the eQRP, but they did a self-directed. There's no debt on it, you know, so it's a cash sale. But it took 3 weeks to get the deposit in. And that just, it baffles me why somebody would pick a a self-directed IRA versus a eQRP?
Mostly people do it because they don't know the difference. They don't understand. And they don't realize that they're taking away all the friction. When you go to an eQRP, there's no delays, there's no friction, there's nobody telling you what you can and can't do. You don't have to wait, and you're not paying any fees for doing anything with an eQRP, whereas an IRA, there's fees. Every company is in business to make profit. The problem is there's a lot of, it's like a bait and switch with a lot of IRA companies where they'll say, oh, it's very inexpensive, or it's free, or it's $50 to set it up. And then you get feed to death for the next 20 years. So that's usually what happens. And then it's really slow and painful to even do anything with it. Plus, if you ever do any leverage deals, you get taxed. I think sometimes people just end up being a little bit short-sighted. And when you really look at the big picture, it makes no sense whatsoever to do an IRA, a self-directed IRA, when you're doing, unless you're doing stocks, then it doesn't matter. But if you're doing real estate, if you're doing Bitcoin, if you're doing gold, here a couple of things that people don't realize. If you wanted to buy gold and silver, you can buy it with an eQRP and take possession. You can hold it. With an IRA, that's forbidden by government regulation. If you want to buy Bitcoin, you can take possession of it. You cannot do that with an IRA. Somebody else has to have custody. So these are big deals. With real estate, you get taxed. If it's leveraged, it takes forever to get anything done. So there's some pretty significant reasons. And unfortunately, most people just don't know, because the IRA industry is a $10 trillion industry. That's how much money is in the IRAs right now. So there's a lot of marketing and a lot of confusion. And there are people that have seen these type of webinars and they get it, and there's no comparison at that point.
Man. What about how much do you need to start? Like if somebody's on here is young and they're just starting out, they have a business with maybe one employee or just themselves. How would they start?
Well, the great thing is there's no minimum to start. It's funny because when I started my real estate career, I had negative money. I had to borrow the down payment for a rental house that I bought. I borrowed it from my Visa, $6,000, and it was funny because I bought that thing, took over a mortgage, and that house turned into 150 houses. So if I had thought that I needed to save $50,000, it probably would have cost me 3 or 4 or 5 years. And instead, the real capital is in your head, but you got to start with some type of fiat or some type of money inside the thing. So how much do you need? You don't have to start with anything. You can contribute new money. And then if you can put 5 or 10 or 20 or $50,000 in, it starts to grow. You just have to really get engaged. This is not going to happen on its own. Like, this is not something where you just contribute and it all works. Like, people think that that's what happens with financial advisors. What works is that their fees keep working against you. So there is no minimum. It's really just a question of how committed you are.
Gotcha. And is there anybody that should not have an eQRP?
Anybody that thinks it's a good idea to buy a Ferrari with your retirement account should not buy. I mean, seriously, because you have control of your money. So it's a bad idea if you're reckless. And in all seriousness, some people would actually do that. Like, I remember buying a Ferrari. It wasn't with a retirement account, but I thought it was a good idea. It was a great way to get arrested in a week on Christmas Eve, which I did. And so there's opportunities to learn things in those situations, but you don't want to do something if you can't follow the rules, because with the IRS, they will hammer you if you don't follow the rules. And that's what we're here to help with. But nobody's going to stop you. If you want to do something stupid or reckless, nobody's going to get in your way.
You just have to have a distribution, right? You just have to pay the tax on that.
Yeah, but there's also, if you do a disqualified transaction, there's a 15% penalty on the actual transaction itself. So it's not just the penalty for withdrawals, it's also the 15% penalty for doing something that's disqualified.
Very good. Very good. That's good to know. So what about, like, if I buy a property with my eQRP, how is it titled? Is it titled in my name? Is it titled, eQRP for the benefit of David Kafka, or what?
It's just titled in the name of the eQRP, and there are ways to title it in the entity that is owned by the eQRP. It's really specific country by country. So, if you're investing in Belize real estate, for example, and there are rules around it needs to be invested, it needs to be in a certain type of entity, that's very easy to do because you've got control of how the entities are structured. So it's not going to be for the benefit of, that's an IRA thing, and that gets very confusing. And a lot of countries have a big problem with that, where they don't want it to be inside of a retirement account. It has to be in somebody's name. Well, you're the trustee, so you've got options there too. So it's really flexible globally, which is important because every country has different rules.
Yeah, very good. So they just want you to confirm again on owning precious metals with the eQRP.
Yeah, so with an eQRP, you're able to actually hold physically the precious metals. With a custodian, for an IRA, somebody else has to. It's a depository. It's required. It's in the tax code. If you ever see a company saying, "Oh, buy with an IRA and take custody," you're violating the rules, and the penalty can be over 100% of your investment. IRA penalties are brutal. They're way more painful than any type of 401k rules. So the reality, though, is that as a trustee of an eQRP, you're able to take possession of things and do what you choose to do because it's your job. So yeah, you can absolutely take possession of it, and you cannot do that with an IRA.
Could I, if I own precious metals, can I move it into a eQRP?
You can't move current assets if you personally own them. If you owned gold and silver with an IRA and it was at a depository, you can move those assets to yourself as the trustee of the eQRP. So you're rolling them over. So then you could take possession of them at that point.
Good. Okay. Very good. So Frank's asking that, you know, the real estate guys promote Paraguay and the oranges with Mike Smith and them. He said that last he looked, self-directed IRA was the way to invest there. Can it be done with the eQRP?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Anything a self-directed IRA can do, an eQRP does better. And there's no restrictions on an eQRP that would say, oh, I can do it within a self-directed IRA. You can do everything, but it's easier, faster, better, and usually less expensive. So just keep that in mind. Anything you've thought about or heard about, most places just talk about self-directed IRAs because that's all they know. They haven't done enough research. All they've had is marketing coming to them from IRA companies. And so they have limited information. You can absolutely invest in the oranges or anything in all these different countries, including the ones in Paraguay for the oranges. So yeah, if you want to do it, then you can do it.
Yeah, I actually took a class on self-directed IRAs, but I don't recommend them anymore. I always recommend the eQRP just because, you know, it's like you said, it's just better. It just makes more sense, and to me at least. What he's telling you is not telling you to scare you about the penalties and things like that. That's what we're here for. We're here to educate you. I'm not here to tell you everything you need to know about the eQRP. I'm just here to give you the basics, and then I bring on, you know, the eQRP professional, and then he will help you make sure you stay, you know, legit to where, you know, you're not in any issues with the IRS. So it appears to get full benefit of eQRP, you need to be able to roll a current 401k that has pre-tax money in it. Is that the case?
It depends on what you're trying to do. There is a benefit to rolling your 401k, and then you can also add additional money from your self-employment income, and you can also take IRAs. You could go start an IRA, put $6,000 into it, and roll it into your eQRP. There's a lot of different things you can do. So full benefit really depends. The full benefit is if you have any money in an eQRP, you've got the ability. Here's one example. Let's say you did what I did when I bought a house in 1999. You took $6,000, which is what I did, and that was in your eQRP. And then you took that and you went and bought a house, and you said, okay, I'm going to take over a mortgage. I'm going to buy this house. I own the house, or my retirement account owns it. And then that house became worth 200,000. So it went up, it went up 100,000 because you bought it for 100. If that happens, that 6,000 turns into 100,000. So the full benefit of the eQRP is that you can have unlimited amounts of debt and no UBIT tax and no tax at all because it's staying in a tax shelter. So the full benefit is that right now with the tax code, you're able to do this and grow things. There was an article recently about Peter Thiel, who is one of the founders of PayPal. He's worth billions and millions of dollars. He took his Roth account from $1,700 to $5 billion. So I guarantee that Ron Wyden, the senator from Oregon, does not like Peter Thiel because he looks at Peter Thiel as one of those cheats, one of those rich guys, and he just wants to hammer him. But that's the tax code, and the tax code is set up by the rich for the rich. And so if you want to play by those same rules, you have to understand you can't just listen to whatever shows up in the Wall Street Journal. You got to be willing to say, what are the rich doing? They're using the eQRP. They're using the Roth eQRP. that's how they build these things. They use it using the rules that are set up to grow wealth.
Yep. And like I've reached out to Damion's team and we've been back and forth and we're going to set up one myself. And I don't have a self-directed IRA. So we're just going to open one up and then just put money in it. And I'll just put money in it and then, just keep growing it. So it's as simple as that. So let's bring this home a little bit. This is All Access Belize. So, we have the question, how does this help? And what's the benefits of investing in Belize real estate? So one of the negatives to Belize, if you will, is there's no financing. So we're always talking to people about how to bring money from North America, US, Canada, whatever. One way is to, refinance or get a home equity line of an investment in your property in North America and come here and pay cash. Of course, one is seller financing, which is very popular. But as Damion said, there's trillions of dollars locked up in self-directed IRAs that can be moved over into eQRPs. And there's money locked up in eQRPs that people are looking for investments. So you can bring that money and invest it here in Belize. Just like Damion said, you can own it in the name of, whatever entity you want. So if you have a US entity, you can own that eQRP in that US entity, correct?
That's right. You've got unlimited options, whether you buy things in that entity or you have, part of the eQRP is that we set up an LLC that's inside of it that you're able to go and buy. So when you walk into Belize and you say, I have a company in America and I want to, and I got in trouble when I was in I think it was Uruguay years ago. I was down there and I said America and they got really mad at me because they said, we're America too. I said, okay, you're South America. And they got really upset. So in the United States, it's when you leave and you go to Belize or anywhere else and you say, I have an LLC and I'd like to invest, that's usually a pretty simple, straightforward thing because most countries understand an LLC or a corporation, and we can do it either way when we have an entity inside your eQRP. So it makes investing very simple because it's very recognizable globally.
Yeah. So so you just take your eQRP money and you just come here and we basically, educate you first. And then once we educate you based on your investment philosophy, what you're looking to do with that, are you looking to have something with not too much cash flow, but you're wanting something that will appreciate? Do you want something with more appreciation or more cash flow and not as much appreciation? We just take basically what you want, buy land with no cash flow that's just going to appreciate. We can do that. And we do quite a bit of sales in retirement money. Matter of fact, Mahogany Bay, there's probably 25-30% of the units sold at Mahogany Bay are probably in some type of retirement account. So that's kind of how we bring it home as far as the QRP and the eQRP, sorry. So we got about 15 minutes. We don't have any questions right now. So if anybody has any questions they want to ask, we appreciate your coming on. Damion, tell us a little bit about other stuff you do. I know you don't only do eQRP, and I know you're not only an investor. So kind of talk about other stuff you do if they're interested in those as well, and how they get in touch with. Do you have a separate? I know you have a separate company, but how would they get in touch with you on, for instance, buying gold and silver?
Well, one of the things that our clients have access to is wholesale gold and silver. So any type of physical gold and silver that you want, you're able to get through the company, through our sister company. It's the best pricing in North America and probably globally. And we offer that to our clients. It's referral only. It's not available to the general public. And it's one of the benefits is we ship it anywhere in the world, and we offer free vaulting for a year. And so you can have indefinite vaulting for free if you're buying something every year. Otherwise, it's free for the first year. And so it's another benefit. We do a lot of education, a lot of training with people like Tom Wheelwright and Tim Gertz and Provision and Kevin Day, people that are absolute authorities in their space for strategy, for accounting, and asset protection. And then of course I've got the Financial Underdogs, which is the FU podcast, and that's where I share my insights. Today I recorded one on the 10-year capital plan. So I do a lot of strategic planning on people, on their life, based on using myself as a petri dish and figuring out what works. I think it's a good strategy. Tim Ferriss does that. I know that Ben Greenfield does that. And so I do that in a lot of financial respects. I just try things and invest money and then report back to the world. Here's what's working. Here's what's not working. So that's part of the formula for wealth and success and fulfillment, is being willing to try things. And I'll give you an example. I had an apartment deal I worked on 2 years ago, and I worked on it for about 2 years, and I spent about $200,000 on it, on the vetting of going through the process. And 2 years into it, I killed the deal the day before our PPM went out. And I did that, and I was the one that lost all the money. It was just my money. And I did that because I'm willing to do a lot of damage on myself, but not on my investors and not on people that are clients. I'll always test it on myself. And in that case, I decided that there was a risk with the partner, the developer, and I wasn't willing, even though there were, as the general partner, as the sponsor of the deal, I would have made a lot, probably first year $1 million in fees, because it was about a $50 million deal. And over, if it had worked, and it was an apartment deal. So 2 years ago, that probably would have been a really good plan for one that worked. It would have been $5-6 million in profits. But the risk to me was that I didn't trust the partner. And so I made the decision, and it's because I've gone through so much hell in the last 20 years. I'm willing to trust my instincts. I lost $25 million in 2008. That taught me a lot about risk and making sure that I was understanding the risk. It's not about the upside, it's about the downside. If you think it's just about the upside, you haven't had a downside event yet. And so I was willing to say, I'm going to take the loss myself before I ever let an investor get near anything. And I think people really respected that. And most people won't do that because they see all the profit, all the money, all the fees. And you got to be really mindful of who you're working with. That was the takeaway for everybody. Be really mindful. It's not just about a good deal, because a bad partner in a good deal is going to end up with a bad experience. But a great partner with an okay deal will make it work.
Yeah, exactly. So again, if we buy gold from you, you would do free vaulting for a year?
We do free vaulting for a year, and we have vaults in 3 different countries, plus the US, multiple places. So you get to choose where you want it, and then at any point it can be shipped anywhere you want in the world.
Wow. Okay. Very good. I did not know that. So Ed is asking, and I know this answer, but we'll let Damion ask it. Can you personally use a Mahogany Bay property owned by an eQRP?
So that's a great example of where you can use the property, even though you own a unit, you wouldn't own your unit. You're not going to get a benefit, but you could absolutely go to Mahogany Bay and rent a unit. You just have to act as if you're a normal person, meaning you don't get a benefit, you don't get a discount because your retirement account gets it, but you can certainly stay at the property. People do that all the time. You couldn't go and buy a unit at Mahogany Bay and then stay in it for free because your retirement account bought it. That would be prohibited.
Right. So if he buys unit 416A, so to speak, with his eQRP, he couldn't stay in that unit, correct?
He could if he booked and he paid for it. Okay. So there's no benefit. The point is, the rules really, it's you not getting benefit from your retirement account today. That's what they're wanting to prevent, because otherwise it's cross-pollinating and it's abusing the system. Okay,
very good. Can the property owned by the eQRP be a rental, or does it have to be owner occupied? So
it has to be an investment, meaning the individual's retirement account. So like Aaron, if you wanted to have your eQRP buy a property, as long as you're not using it, it can be whatever you wanted. You could sell it to somebody, you could have it as a rental. Owner occupied would imply that the owner was using it, and the owner is the eQRP. So the eQRP is never going to use it. It's always going to be either you or a renter, and you are prohibited because you own your retirement account.
Right. Very good. So I have an eQRP, and I bought a property in Mahogany Bay. how are the expenses and the income taken care of?
So everything, if you're any investment that your retirement account makes, any expense is paid by the retirement account. So for example, if you buy gold and you had a vault fee because you kept it for a couple of years, that fee would be paid from your eQRP. If you're buying a property, let's say you buy a property in Belize and you need an attorney, your eQRP buys a property in Belize and you need an attorney to look at paperwork, your eQRP pays for the attorney. And so any expense that's directly related to an investment that is owned by an eQRP is paid by the eQRP. In fact, it has to be paid because otherwise it looks like you making a contribution. So misunderstanding. A lot of people say, well, I have to pay for it myself, or they get into trouble because they don't have the money in their retirement account because they used the wrong thing. They used an IRA and they can't get enough money in there. eQRP solves that because you can actually put a lot more money in there. So it works out really well.
Yeah. And so any income it makes goes into the eQRP, correct?
Yeah, it's the same thing as if you have a corporation and your corporation goes and buys an investment property, you don't get to keep that income because you're not the owner. The corporation is. It's the same thing. This is it's its own entity.
Right. Very good. So somebody's asking if you are investing in Belize real estate.
I'm doing due diligence right now on some property there at Mahogany Bay. And so I may end up doing that. I don't have any currently in Belize.
Okay, very good. Claudette, very informative and look forward to getting the information from you. She currently owns a house in Corazal and loves it. So that's very good. So I hope everybody, got some value out of this. I mean, that's what this is for. We didn't technically talk a lot about Belize, but everything Damion talked about can be used here in Belize if you're an American citizen, of course. I know Canadians, they have the RSSPs, and there are ways I think you can buy property with them, but you have to like loan it out and buy it that way. But check with your tax person in Canada. Again, we're not tax professionals. This is just how we understand it. We still have, a few more minutes. You can ask any questions, again, about the eQRP or Belize. Any final thoughts, Damion?
There was one question that Thomas had, and the question is, can you put regular or W-2 income into the eQRP to reduce your tax burden? The answer is yes. And people are going to say, wait a second, I don't think that's true. It actually is true. There are ways to use the eQRP and IRAs. And so we can take, even if you have no self-employment income, we can take chunks of cash and maneuver it from your W-2, get it into an eQRP and reduce your tax liability. So that's why I say that anybody can do this, and it doesn't really matter. Even if you had only passive income from rental real estate, that can be converted into the active income that allows you to contribute and seed an eQRP. The big takeaway for you guys is really that this is the one place where you can take your money, put it into a vehicle, and have it tax-free for life. Not just growing and compounding, but taking it out. There's nothing else that works like that. Not life insurance, not 1031s. There's nothing in the tax code that works where you can grow it and take it out tax-free at all. It just doesn't exist. So this is one of those things you really want to consider adding on. It's not the only thing that you should do by any stretch of the imagination, but it is something that can really change your life. Because when you think about where we're going, we're in a very low tax rate environment. What's President Biden doing right now? He's talking to all these world leaders, the G7 presidents and prime ministers, and saying, let's all have a fair tax system so that everybody's the same. Let's raise the tax rates. Let's bump them by 50% with corporate. Let's move the individual tax rates up, and let's tax the rich. And the rich, whatever that means, the $400,000 earner. So when you think about what's going on, are we more likely to be in a higher tax environment down the road or less? And the answer is 100% higher. So it's really important to start shifting things to a place where there's zero tax forever. Like Peter Thiel. I don't even know if you like him, know him, hate him, whatever. He has a great book, by the way, called 0 to 1. Highly recommend his book. And he taking a $1,700 chunk and turning it into $5 billion over 22 years was a pretty good return. I think that's better than a mutual fund in the S&P 500. I'm just saying it might be worth looking into.
Right. How long must funds be in the eQRP before you can withdraw them without penalty?
there's no limit. You can pull them out in 5 minutes. So any money you put into a Roth account, you can take out tax-free, penalty-free at any time, any age. Doesn't matter if you're 59 and a half. If you take other funds, any funds you put in, you can take out. You're going to pay taxes if they're pre-tax, but we can avoid the penalty. So there's never any reason to pay a 10% penalty. I've had some people come to me and say, I just pulled out $300,000 or $400,000 from a 401k. I paid a penalty, I paid taxes, and I said, it's too bad you didn't know me 90 days ago, because I could have saved you $40,000 in penalty. That's the value of having the team. You know, you guys that have David on your team, David knows Belize forwards, backwards, upside down, left and right. And that's like, I wouldn't know what to ask in Belize. I just go to David and I say, David, what do I need to know? And David tells me everything. And that's the same thing. You find the experts that's what they do. This is all I do. I mean, we have companies that are part of our group, and we have people that focus on those areas like the gold and silver. I focus on this space, and so I can help you navigate, and so can the people that I've trained. But the reality is, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know which number to dial.
Right, exactly. So again, text that number to Damion, 72,000. Text eQRP to 72,000. And again, his email is, she put in the chat as well, or his company is eqrp.co. Our next all access is August 5th at 6 o'clock. I have one of my buddies, he's in the tourism police. I want to bring him on. He's not confirmed yet, but if not, then we'll just do a random questions about Belize. I know some of you had some updates that you wanted on COVID and things like that. So let me give you a quick COVID update. We did just lower the mandate where you don't have to wear a mask on the golf cart anymore. You still have to wear a mask when you're walking around in public, unless you're exercising or on the beach or at the pool. When you're going to a restaurant, you have to wear a mask, but once you're at your table, you do not. Our restaurants are at 50% capacity because we have we now have a little over 300 cases, where we were down to 24 cases a couple months ago. The land borders are open for tourists. The waterways are open for yachts. And we just started cruise tourism this week. We're about 80% on airlift. So our Canadian airlines have not started yet. Alaska Air has not started yet, but they will start toward the end of this year. Southwest is going to start again. The Canadian airlines will start. So we're going to be over 120% of airlift, which means we're going to have more airlift than before COVID by the beginning of 2022. So tourism is starting to rise. People are tired of being at home. Everybody says they feel safe when they're here. You do have to have a COVID test coming in unless you are vaccinated. We do not make you get vaccinated to come here. It's a personal choice. And then that's a whole nother discussion. If you want to get that or not. I personally do not, just my personal opinion. But when you go to the US, you have to get tested. Canada has started to open up again, so hopefully we'll get our Canadian buddies back. So things are slowly opening up, but we still have to be careful, social distance and things like that. So we appreciate that. We appreciate Damion. We appreciate you taking your time to be here with us. And if y'all have any questions, please reach out to Damion at eqrp.co. And reach out to me at David at First Choice Belize, or my David at Caribbean Capital Group.com. And appreciate everything. Thank you, Yolanda, for managing everything on the back end. Damion?
Yeah, just one quick shout out. I want to say hey to Eric Gam. I know he's out in Belize right now. He's a friend of ours from out in the Midwest. So Eric, if you're still on here, just wanted to give you a shout out. It's good to see you on here, man. Hope you're having fun in Belize.
He had a bunch of good questions.
Agreed.
All right, everybody. Thank you.